Kublai phi ki parla pat ki para bangai baro ngan puli biang ifi ko ga jing tho na ga jing kintiu khat khandai spa andri pun riu kani ga jing tho ga de khin phareng ba ongkum ni shall we worship less than god bala tho da u Whitehead a philosophy of freedom we can base a superior religion one in accord with life as we experience it by Charles Hartshorne, professor of philosophy at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. That man has a certain creative power is a commonplace. Making the most of this power is termed living creatively. But not only is creativity a widely recognized ideal for human action, it is also the first principle of the most daring and powerful philosophical system of this century, that of Whitehead. And Whitehead was preceded in this by other less notable philosophers. For these philosophers, to be is to create. It is impossible to exist in absolute uncreative fashion. From atoms to deities, all things in their degree and kind act creatively. I believe that we have in this rather new type of philosophy an intellectual basis for religion far superior to any other. But unfortunately, only a few, even among professional philosophers, have a clear idea of this way of thinking. First, what is it to create? Whitehead takes as his primary example the process of human experiencing. His doctrine is simple: to experience is to create. And what is the resulting product? Experience itself. Each experience is something new and unique, and to experience is always a free production of novelty. People have looked for freedom in action, and of course, freedom must somehow show up in action. But still, the first stage of free action is the way in which we interpret or experience the world. Only you or I can determine our own way of feeling and thinking our environment. The utmost slave has some freedom here, which none can wholly suppress in him while he is alive. No matter how others coerce or persuade him, he finally must make his own unique and unpredictable response to the stimuli others bring to bear upon him. It is vain to talk about psychological predictions as an absolute, for even after an experience has taken place, not all the words in all languages could precisely describe that experience. And what cannot be said even afterwards certainly cannot be said in advance. Suppose that a man grows angry as we have predicted. There are many forms and qualities of anger experience as there are cases, and only more or less rough and crude descriptions of their differences are possible. Every experience is in some degree an unpredictable novelty. The stimuli molding an experience are many. The 5 or 9 senses are operating. Memory is relating us, at least unconsciously, to thousands of incidents of the past. But this multiplicity of influences is to produce a single unitary experience. This vast multitude of factors must flow together to produce a single new entity, the experience of the moment. By no magic can casual laws derive this new unity from the previous multiplicity. Certainly, the many stimuli tells us much more about the response, but it is a logical impossibility they should tell us all. An emergent synthesis is needed to decide just how each item is to blend in a single complex sensory, emotional, intellectual whole, that is the experience. Any motives are either but items going into the synthesis, or else they are the synthesis. To experience must be a free act or nothing intelligible. Why is this not more generally realized? in part because we have our minds chiefly upon the most important and exceptional modes of creativity, and so we overlook the humbler ones which are always there, like the man in Moliere who did not realize that he had been talking prose all his life. Freedom is always there, but the unusual kind and degrees of freedom are not always there. It is indeed important to distinguish between the higher and the lower forms of freedom. Yet we never shall understand life and the world until we see that the zero degree of freedom can only be the zero of experiencing and even of reality. For apart from experience, the idea of reality is empty. Accordingly, Whitehead proposes that we generalize and take the free act of experiencing as the universal principle of reality. Not that human experience is the principle of reality, far from it. Human experience is only one form. From man to molecules and atoms, we have a series of modes of organization. At no point can we say, below this there could be no experience. If atoms respond to stimuli, and they do, how else could they show that they sense or feel? And if you say that they have no sense organs, the reply is neither do one call animals, yet they seem to perceive their environment. Neither do one cell animals, yet they seem to perceive their environments. Imagine the universe as a vast system of experiencing individuals on innumerable levels. Each individual is in some measure free, for experiencing is a partly free act. Thus, creativity, emergent novelty, is universal. In this way, we perhaps understand why the physicists have had to reformulate the laws of nature as statistical, not absolute uniformities. In all individual acts, if in all individuals act freely, what prevents the world from falling into hopeless confusion and chaos? How can there be either statistical regularities? Must not limits be somehow imposed upon freedom in order to make a world? How are the limits imposed? There are but two answers possible. In a philosophy of universal creative experience, either the various forms of experience scattered through nature miraculously limit or control themselves and each other and thus preserve a measure of harmony or mutual compatibility, or else some superior and supernatural, or at least cosmic form of freedom furnishes a directive which ordinary freedom accepts or obeys. Without guidance, order seems a mere mystery. In a philosophy of freedom, only a superior form of creativity to which all things respond and whose influence is given a priority can furnish the guidance which orders the world. This is one way of putting the argument for belief in God. Divine action is supreme freedom, furnishing a general direction to all lesser forms of freedom, thereby giving the universe an order. How is this cosmic direction imparted? How does the divine creativity act on the lesser creativities? How do lesser creativities set on each other? The answer which the new type of philosophy gives us as follows: experience must have stimuli. We do not experience in a vacuum, nor does one merely experience his own experience of his own. Of what? There must be objects of experience, data which are already there, ready to be experienced. Yet, if nothing is in the world but creative experience, what then are the objects which are experienced? Simply previous case of experience. Some of these are one's own earlier experience as one remembers them. The rest are of other kinds. The cells of one's body, I believe, are constantly furnishing their little experiences, which, pooled in our more comprehensive experience, constitute what we call our sensations. The cells respond to or experience our experiences as it's shown by the influence of our thoughts and feelings upon our bodily changes. The stimuli always influence the response, but they never wholly determine it. Recall also that the stimuli are really early responses, experiences which had their own stimuli. Thus, what sets limits to the freedom of a response is simply previous partly free responses which have become stimuli. When two of us talk, each response of one becomes a stimuli to the other. Always there is a degree of freedom, with the limits upon the present act of freedom is the sum of past acts to which it is a reaction. Experience as emerge synthesis Experience as emergent synthesis feeds on its own previous products and on nothing else whatever. This is the only intelligible experience from a blind dualism of mind and matter. But what prevents anarchy if freedom alone limits freedom? Keeping to our language of stimulus and response, what is needed to order the world is a higher level of response, which, like every form of response, becomes in its turn a stimulus, in this case, the supreme stimulus. Each individual in the world is in dialogue with its neighbors, influencing and being influenced by them. But each individual is also and above all in dialogue, largely unconscious, no doubt, with the divine individual. Is this not the traditional belief in God in new verbal dress? It is, and it isn't. The old view had some disturbing features which our language avoids. It was usually said that while God influenced all things, nothing influenced God. For him, there are no stimuli. Hence, when he influences or stimulates the world, it is in a wholly extraordinary way. God, in the old theory, does not respond, he merely creates out of nothing. If we refuse to allow an analogy between ordinary creative action and the divine creating of the cosmos, we use a word the meaning of which we cannot provide. Our new philosophical doctrine is that even God's creativity is his higher form of emergent synthesis or response to stimuli. He influences us supremely because he is supremely open to our influence. He responds infinitely delicately to all things, while we respond delicately only to changes in our brain cells. He contributes to our lives in superior fashion because, in equally superior fashion, he receives contributions from us. Like the sensitive parent or ruler, he enjoys observing our feelings and thoughts and responds to them with a perfection of appreciation to which no parent or ruler can attain. Because of God can appreciate us, because only God can appreciate us together with all our neighbors in our full worth. We unconsciously respond to this appreciation as we do not to any other. And so the order of the world is possible, despite the assumption that only freedom exists to limit freedom. Consider now the advantages of this way of viewing God. Unlike the notion of divine creation as a purely one way action proceeding from God, our view does not threaten to deny the freedom or creativity of the creatures. God, being supremely free, produced as his creatures individuals wholly without freedom. Men think that they make decisions, but God, men say, has made all things, hence all decisions. But if God has literally and completely made my decision, how is it mine? Granted that we are willing to think of ourselves as absolute puppets whose every move is wholly controlled by deity. One could How could such puppets even have the action of freedom or form the theory that they are puppets controlled by the free decisions of God? Or would God for them be the great puppet controlled by what? The entire view seems logically untenable. In our philosophy, our universal freedom, no such divine monopoly upon decision making can be conceived. To create is to experience. To respond to the creative freedom of others, hence to be supremely creative, is to respond supremely to that freedom. Look at another difference between the usual theistic doctrine and our view. If God creates by sheer fiat out of nothing, why does he not make a world wholly good? I suggest that the very problem is false. We do not need to worship any such all determining creator in God. Of course, a worshipping God must have the supreme cosmic or perfect form of creative power. To say that in God is the perfect or infinite form of creative response to the freedom of others is to imply that he has the freedom of others to respond to. Why then evil? Because the making of the world is not a simple act of deity, but a fusion of divine and lesser acts, all in their fashion, self determining, creative, or free. As Lee Keir said a century ago, God has created us creators of ourselves. Does such a view limits the power of God? This way of putting the question prejudices the answer and is to be rejected. To exert power, in our view, is to respond to the responses of others in such a way that the new response becomes, in its turn, a new stimulus. In this philosophy, the word power has no other meaning which could be used to describe God. So we need not limit God's power to make room for the freedom of the created creatures, all to explain evil. We need only take care that when we speak of divine or perfect power, we have a meaning for the word. This meaning will take care of creaturely freedom automatically. If our creatures must be free, if all creatures must be free, then no divine directive could do more than set boundaries to the possibilities of discord and disorder in the world. Absolute order could in no way be guaranteed, not because God is weak, but because it would not be strength to abolish creaturely freedom, and with it any world upon which the strength could be exercised. The problem of evil in its classical form is a pseudo problem due to the misuse of words. And yet, millions of people over the earth do not believe in God. They would tell you chiefly because of evil. Even the book of Job hints at my position. Believing in God does not necessarily mean accepting traditional religious views such as the notions of personal immorality, heaven, and hell. Personal immorality seems rather a rival to believe in God than a logical consequence of it. It is God who never dies, not man. Man's spheres of action is on this planet or eventually in this solar system and perhaps galaxy between birth and death. As Robert Frost said, Earth's the right place for love. I don't know where it's likely to go better. But is it an intelligent view that the only value our lives will have after they are over is in the faint echoes and influences which may linger for a while in human memory and human life? Can we really live merely for posterity from a long run point of view? I believe not. And if you say that we live partly for our own sakes, for the sheer joy of living, then I reply, yes, indeed. But I am speaking of the long run. And in the long run, we and our joys are, from the naturalistic point of view, not there at all. If you say, we live merely for the present moment, I reply, not only the highest animals can do that. And from a rational point of view, once the future is brought in, is it not arbitrary to step at one's own death or that of one's grandchildren? As each of us lives on, from time to time, some of his cells die. We do not hesitate to suppose that the cells are there chiefly for our benefit. And if some of them die, do we not go on? And is not their contribution to our experiences in some degree preserved in our memories? After all, the parts are for the sake of the whole. We readily see and accept this where we are the whole. But is it not rational to say the same ever where we are the parts and not the whole? Each of us is at least a part of humanity, but is that the ultimate whole of which we are parts? Is not humanity itself a fragment in space time? Only a cosmic life, it seems, can be the real whole for the sake of which all exist. We are such egoists that we try every trick and every evasion to miss the point.